flowing and that gives you either imagination or a headache. I am Catherine the Great, who is the longest reigning female monarch in Russia's history, a great example to all of perseverance and leadership. I overcame many obstacles in my childhood and during my reign in Russia. Truly, it was by no coincidence that I earned the title of Catherine the Great. I, Sophie Frederick von Anhalt-Zerbst, was born in Prussia on May 2nd, 1729. My mother, Joanna, was sad that she didn't have a son. 18 months later, William was born, and my mother would devote most of her attention to him until he died of scarlet fever. My parents were noble people, but not royalty. One night, on January 1st, my family sat down to a fancy New Year's dinner, and a courtier arrived unexpectedly. Johanna was delighted to find out there was a letter from St. Petersburg. The letter read, "The Empress Elizabeth desires your highness, accompanied by your daughter, to come to Russia as soon as possible." Johanna knew this meant I, who was 14, was now chosen to marry Peter, who would be the future emperor of Russia. Because of this, we set out for Moscow. It was a long drive to Moscow, about 1,000 miles riding on the winter highway, the best kept road in Russia. Rumors were that a young lady would arrive to marry into the royal family. After the long ride, my mother and I arrived at Golovin Palace on February 9th. I stood there waiting to meet Empress Elizabeth and her nephew Peter. I had once met Peter and knew my whole life that I was destined to marry him. When I had met Peter as a young boy, he was shy and sickly. I was disappointed to see that he had not changed much at all as a young man. I devoted myself to studying the Russian language and would walk the palace halls at night barefoot and in my nightgown. I even caught pneumonia because of the cold halls. In April, I recovered from pneumonia and was going to marry Peter until he became sick with smallpox. He was sent away quickly so I wouldn't become sick. Once Peter was well again, we were married. Sadly, on January 5th, 1762, Empress Elizabeth died. I mourned over her death, while Peter joyfully celebrated himself becoming the new emperor by throwing parties. By this, Russian people recognized his behavior, his self-centered behavior. He was very foolish, demanding, and lazy. As the new empress, I needed to live up to my new role. I awoke at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning to study Russian history for 9 years. In my spare time, I rode horses and studiously read French and Russian books. I also learned to speak Italian and English. Peter suddenly moved me to an estate in the country, then he moved into a fancier, larger home. Soon after, I was sent to the army barracks. The soldiers kneeled loyally before me. I explained to them that Peter had abandoned the Russian people and that I would become the ruler to save the country. 14,000 soldiers kneeling down before me. This was my final chance to overcome the terrible emperor, Peter. On the way to his house, dressed in a military uniform, a soldier rode up with a letter proclaiming that Peter had been overthrown and would not be the emperor. The King of Prussia later wrote, Peter allowed himself to be dethroned like a child being sent to bed. Peter died a week later. No one knew how he died. There was much suspicion over his death, and many people suspected that I had secretly ordered my soldiers to kill him, although it could not be proven and remains a mystery. I was finally crowned Empress on September 22, 1762. I wore a large crown of 40 diamonds, 8 pearls, and an enormous ruby that weighed 9 pounds. While I reigned, I built many schools and hospitals. I also created a 6-building art gallery called the Hermitage, which was opened in 1852. It is the second largest art museum and is still open today and contains more than 3 million works of art and prehistoric artifacts. Later, I expanded Russia's borders, and after a 35-year reign, I died from a stroke. I realized that Peter was a poor ruler and that I could rule alone. While ruling, I expanded Russia's borders, built schools and hospitals, and much more. I fiercely loved my people. In return, my people loved me and truly wanted me as their leader. Amazingly, I reigned for 35 years and was the longest ruling female leader in Russia's history.